Hello, Softball Speakeasy fans. It is one of your hosts here, Raine Wilson. Thank you all so much for tuning in. This is a little bit different of an intro than we're used to having, but for a couple of reasons. Number one, want to let you know that the audio sounds really good this episode, but not quite as good as what you're hearing now. You might remember in the first episode of this season, we mentioned we got professional mics this year. And we just want to say thank you for your grace and patience with the fact that we are still learning how to produce the show with these professional mics. So one week, Kelly's mic doesn't work. The next week, mine doesn't. And so the audio still sounds fine, but we just wanted to give you that heads up and also just preview the show for you. We talk about so many incredible things this episode, talk all things Clemson and Duke, where those teams are at. We talk about key matchups coming up soon across NCAA softball, the top teams in the country, talk about analytics, how to use them, and it is just an altogether incredible episode. So hope you enjoy. Thank you so much for tuning in, and without further ado, enjoy the show. And welcome back, everybody. It's episode 4 of season 3 of Softball Speakeasy, and the goal of the show is to offer next level access to the 2025 college softball season through the perspectives of a TV analyst and a Clemson coach. And we aim to provide a behind the scenes look at what it takes to play softball at the highest level. Kelly, how are you doing? Look at the set. The set, I've been getting a lot of compliments
Yeah,
on it about the
really.
vibe. And I mean, I think you're really carrying the weight for us.
It's just softball speakeasy, right? That's all I can say. It's softball
It's,
speakeasy.
it's just what we do.
It is
It's a speakeasy. And
this is
I mean,
us.
it's us. It's a speakeasy. It's hidden. It's kind of
Mhm,
secretive. It's got good lighting. It's got the
mhm.
vibe. And you know who had the vibe this weekend? We're the Clemson Tigers.
Yes,
Wow.
ma'am.
Man, what a weekend for Clemson. What
Yeah.
a weekend for the Tigers. We're just going to jump right into it. Undefeated weekend.
Mhm.
Edged out Elon 4-3, and then a thrilling victory over Villanova and 1-0 in extra innings, and then pounced over Marshall a couple of times. One thing I want to note about this weekend was our good friend also had her broadcasting debut.
Yeah.
Caroline Jacobson was on the call. There's just so much to talk about, Kelly, but just want to get your initial reactions to the weekend for Clemson.
Yeah, I mean, it was our home opening weekend, and they showed out, and I don't know if it was the comfort of home, but it was finally the Clemson softball I knew they could play. Defense was
Mhm.
clean, pitching was strong. I mean, hitting, our bats were on fire. So it was really exciting to see all aspects of the game just firing.
Yeah, it had to feel good for those players, but for you all as a program, what stood out the most? You mentioned pitching, you mentioned the bats, you mentioned defense, but for
Mhm.
you, when you look back on the weekend, what was the star of the show, if you will, in terms of those 3 phases of the game?
As a fan, I'd probably say the bats, but as a coach and someone that's on the team, I think it was our defense. We previously, in our first 2 weeks, just made the game harder than it had to be. We
Mhm.
were speeding up everything, and we were trying to throw before we caught the ball, and our defense is what really impressed me this week of just, like, making some unbelievable plays. We got Maddie Moore and Marion Collins right there in the middle, and they are some strong defenders, so defense is definitely what took my heart away this weekend.
Yeah, and Clemson improves to 8-6 overall and
Mhm.
4-0 at home. I wanna talk we've touched on it throughout the entirety of Softball Speakeasy's existence, and that is the Clemson fan base, the fans. Why? I mean, let's just actually roll it back a little bit. If you're new to Softball Speakeasy, if you're a new softball fan, if you're not, you would know that Clemson has been around not very long. Like,
Mhm.
what do you call it? Team 6 is this year? Is that
Yep.
correct?
Yep.
Team 6, game 1, the fans were there, sold
Mhm.
out. They had chants already somehow. What differentiates Clemson fans from other fans across the country?
Clemson rolls so deep, like
Yeah.
so, so, so deep. It's insane. If you build it, they will come. If you look at our
Mhm.
facility, it is top, top, top level. I mean, the seats, the colors, the way it's just built, it's beautiful. And have you heard of the deep end?
I have heard of the deep end, but tell me
Oh,
more.
so the Deep End is a group of people. I truly I need to find out a little bit more about them because I don't know who they are. I just know them as the Deep End. But they park in right field, and it's like this wooden boat that they built at the back, like their tailgate. So they have a truck, and the
Mhm.
trunk part of their car is a wooden boat. They built it out of wood, and they stand in it the entire game. They're honestly there before warmups.
My
And
gosh.
they have their own speaker. They don't stop the speaker when the game's going. Like, they continue to go the entire game just playing music. They got a bubble machine out there, they got a blowhorn, and they're standing the entirety of the game.
That's amazing, and that is just a microcosm of the entire Clemson fan base that they show up day in, day out for their Lady Tigers,
Yes.
and the fans are gonna certainly need to be rowdy coming Wednesday. So this actually oh man, this comes out on Friday. This game has already happened. We're
Damn.
gonna talk through what what the lead up looks like. You all are playing Georgia, the
Yep.
Bulldogs, at home on Wednesday.
Mhm.
How now that we're past that game, now it's Friday, it was Wednesday. If you're predicting,
Yeah.
what were the fans like on Wednesday
Oh my
against Georgia?
gosh. Well, let's just say there's gonna be some animal cruelty happening on Wednesday. There are gonna be some dogs on the softball field.
Whoa, we might have to cut that. We might have to mute that.
No, but all seriousness, Clemson fans are gonna show out.
Yeah.
It's our first big game on the stadium, and we just left last weekend. I mean, that last game to Marshall, if you guys were able to watch, it was a fun game pitching-wise, hitting-wise, base running. It was just I'm excited that was the last game right before Georgia because I just think this team needs a little bit of confidence, especially playing those big opponents very early on in the season.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. This would be a massive,
Mhm.
massive and pivotal moment for Clemson against Georgia at home this Wednesday. I know for sure I'm going to tune in, and of course, as this comes out, you all already know the results. And then next week, not this coming weekend for Clemson, but the week after, do you know who rolls into town?
Duke, Duke, mother
Duke, Duke, Duke.
Oh, that's
Yes.
gonna be
So
so awkward for me.
yeah, it's gonna be weird. It's gonna be weird. You're the second
Ah,
person to leave Duke and go to Clemson.
yeah.
Now, yours is as a coach, we're talking about Caroline Jacobson, who played at Duke and then
Mhm.
transferred to Clemson. Probably weird for both of you.
Yeah.
But just to tease a little bit, for next week's show, we have a very, very, very special star-studded guest. Some might say she is one of the best. I would say she's one of the best
Mm,
players in the country and had an incredible weekend. So Duke and Clemson on the horizon, not this weekend, but the weekend after. But we've talked about Clemson. Let's
yeah.
talk about Duke this weekend.
Oh,
What a weekend that they had at Mary Nutter. I'm just going to run through the wins that they had and then we can discuss. They beat LMU 9-1. They had a couple of midweeks against ECU that were canceled, but then they went to the Mary Nutter Classic, and this is a renowned
mhm.
tournament every single year, and they showed up 3-0 to beat Nebraska in extra innings against Jordy Ball, beat Howard 13-1, took a 1-0 victory over BYU, 2-0 over Minnesota, and then beat number 4 UCLA 1-0, capping it off with an Amaya Burgess insanity catch.
Insane.
So before we get into the UCLA game and that catch by Amaya, want to just get your thoughts on the weekend and the domination by Duke at
Yeah.
Mary Nutter.
Oh, I mean, they dominated, and that is such a that is, like, one of the preseason's top tournaments. I think what surprised me not surprised, but what I really loved about Duke that past week is that the pitching staff, it was Cass, Danny, and Sophie, and they were all lights out, and
Mhm.
I think a lot of people, when they think of Duke, they think of Cass in the circle, but they're really putting together a staff, and it was really exciting to see all 3 pitchers just show out.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We talked about it, I think episode 1 or episode 2 about how Cass will carry a lot of the weight, but the arms behind her or with her, we should say, are at a very, very high level, and they showed it this weekend against some really, really good teams. And I'm excited to see kind of how they progress as a staff moving forward. A big series this weekend. It's
Hmm.
Friday. The first game is tonight against South Carolina. I'll be on the call for that one. Only the Friday night game, but they have the whole entire series this weekend against South Carolina. That'll be interesting. South Carolina coming into the game undefeated. The
Mm,
old Charlotte head coach, Ashley Chastain, now Woodard, she got married, now is at South Carolina. And you and I both know there is a little bit of a rivalry
yep.
there
Hmm.
between Charlotte's program and Duke. Now, a lot of that Charlotte program goes to South Carolina. And all of a sudden, I mean, maybe that rivalry continues. What do you think of this weekend when you think USC undefeated taking on Duke at home?
It's exciting to see an ACC and SEC matchup. Usually it's maybe one game, a midweek, or in the tournament, but I love that it's three games because you'll really see holes. You'll really see maybe the opposite of holes, of just like thriving areas in both games, in both
Mhm.
ACC and SEC. But Charlotte and Duke have always been a rivalry from fall to spring. We play them every year. And them going to South Carolina, they're a pretty good little team out there, and I think it's going to be a very competitive game on both sides. I'm excited to see who comes out winning.
Yeah, I'm stoked to see how that turns out because not only does South Carolina undefeated going in, they got some key transfers in the circle, key transfers offensively as well. That'll be a lot of fun to watch. But I did want to touch on one aspect or facet of Duke's game that has really improved in the last couple of years,
Hmm.
and that's the defense. A
Hmm.
couple years ago, the defense, I think it was like ninth out of 10 teams in the ACC, wasn't great. And then Coach Taylor White comes in, and I mean, of course, and Coach Watkins, all the coaches were a part of that, but
Yeah.
I want to talk about what that looked like day to day to improve the defense.
Mm.
Like, how, in your perspective of last year and then this year, how do you go in and take a team that fielding percentage was like 963, the goal average being 970, to now where they're at, which is like 980, 981? What does that look like day to day?
Yeah. It's funny because I'm thinking about my 4 years completely at Duke, and
Yeah.
I feel like I was like in those 4 years, I saw the improvement to when my last year, my senior year, our fielding was pretty dang good,
Hmm.
and I think a lot of us were timid almost, and Coach Taylor and Coach Liv just really made us take pride in the outfield and in the infield. It was like almost, if you get on the field with us on this dirt at our home turf at Duke, you're gonna play on our grass, our dirt, and we know how to play best on it. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
we understand the game. We understand there's like almost an unspoken language. Like, as a catcher, I was like, I didn't even have to really tell my cut where to go. It was already done. We did it so many times. We took so much pride in being so perfect with the smallest details. I mean, like placement of your tag right where the base is. You're not tagging the person, you're tagging the front of the bag. Where you're lining up for the cut. We took so much pride in these small details. And I think that's what's really, really proving Duke's defense right now.
I definitely don't. I think it doesn't hurt to have really good pitching develop
Yes.
too. But to your point, and I think that there's like, it's not that the product of good pitching is that you play defense less, but more so the confidence that you feel when you have aces in the circle. I think that that's a real thing that you feel defensively, that like she's putting everything she has into the game
Yeah.
and I need to back her up. So it's been really cool to see the evolution. I also think that in my time at Duke, I, I had a few different assistant coaches, and some were more offensively heavy and some were more defensively. And I think if you ask them, one might say, no, hitting, scoring wins. And the other might say, no, defense wins championships. I think I kind of sit in the middle. And I think it also depends on like what tools you have on the tool
Mhm.
belt to kind of determine, how your team is going to win, because every single team is different. But I did want to talk about the defenses, the offenses, and of course the pitching staffs across the ACC. So this one, is called Guess the
Mm.
ACC Team. Guess the number one ACC team in batting average. They are also number 2 in the country right now
Oh, in batting average?
in batting average. Number 1 in the ACC.
Okay, I might be biased, but I'm going with Duke. Is
Ah.
no? Oh my gosh, do I get a second
This is a
guess?
shock, honestly. I was
It's a
so surprised.
shock? Let me get
Yeah.
one more guess, okay.
Okay.
Batting average, is it UNC?
Nope.
Okay, who is it?
Let me read to you the top batting averages across the ACC. This
Okay.
is gonna your gonna jaw is gonna be dropped. And look, I'm gonna own the fact that I could be surprised because I have not been paying attention enough.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm gonna own that. Number one in the ACC batting average, batting 411 as a team, Stanford.
Oh, good for
Yes,
them.
Stanford. Now we'll talk in a second about the schedule.
Mhm,
We got to, and also sample size is very small. It's very early, but
mhm.
it goes Stanford, Florida State, Syracuse, North Carolina, Virginia Tech, California, Notre Dame, Duke at 8, Clemson at 9, Louisville, Georgia Tech, NC State, Virginia, Boston College, and Pitt. What is your
Damn.
reaction to Duke being at 8, Clemson at 9, and Stanford leading the ACC in batting average so
Well,
far through 14 games?
good for Stanford. I am just happy for Stanford because I feel like they have had this stereotype put on them that it was just
Mhm.
Nyjah that carried them last year, and that their hitting was, like, okay. Like, I think they really took that to heart and proving it this year. I haven't really paid much attention to their games either, so
Mhm.
a little fault on me as well, but
There's only so much time in the day for you.
yeah, I mean, I am surprised that Duke is down there and Clemson right there as well.
Yeah.
So, ACC is gonna be interesting this year.
It is, and let's also make the caveat one more time that this is non-conference play, so a lot of
Mhm.
this will likely change, and also strength of schedule varies greatly between these teams. But I mean, to your point of your being surprised about Duke, I mean Duke's batting 308 as a team, so
Yeah.
pretty good.
Mhm.
But let's go on the other side of things. So we just talked offensively. Let's talk pitching.
Mm.
Who is number 1 in the ACC in the circle in terms of ERA.
Okay.
Kelly, who's your guess?
My guess, I'm going with Virginia Tech because I've seen a lot of Lemley just
Mhm.
schooling people. No?
Ah, nope.
Okay, do I get a
Virginia Tech
second
is
guess?
3rd.
Oh, let me guess. Is it Duke?
Ah,
No.
Duke is 4th.
Oh my goodness. Is it UNC?
Ah, North Carolina is 11th. So I will
Man.
read to you. I know this was shocking to me as well. And again, owning the fact that I just have not been able to watch as much softball.
Mhm.
And number 1 in the ACC with an ERA of 1.14, 12-2 on the year is the Syracuse Orange.
Wow.
Yes, yes, having a fantastic year in the circle so far. And followed by Syracuse is NC State, Virginia Tech, Duke, Florida State, Virginia, Louisville, California, Stanford, Clemson, North Carolina, Boston College, Pitt, Georgia Tech, and Notre Dame, rounding out the ERAs with 4.62 so far. So Syracuse, top dogs in the circle this year. Is that surprising to you? What's your gut reaction to that news, Kelly?
Yeah, it's surprising. I think Syracuse, not to be mean, but it just is what it is, has been kind of on the lower side of the ACC rankings historically. Um, I know there might be mention of schedule, and I don't have their schedule, and I don't wanna go into it, but also who are they playing, you know?
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of factors that go into it, but hell yeah, good for Syracuse. I'm always a fan of the underdog, and I enjoy when teams are proving people wrong, and
Yeah.
Syracuse, I'm pretty sure no one would see them at the top of pitching in the ACC.
I agree, and I'm happy for them too, and I hope this gives them confidence as they head into ACC play. To your question or your question marsh
Mhm.
to your question mark about schedule, you're spot on. The schedule has been pretty light. The only real teams that they've played has been just one, in that Georgia. They played Georgia twice and they lost both of those games. But who knows? I mean, the confidence they're building now in the circle is
Mhm.
good. And same could be said for Stanford. Haven't played really too many top opponents, but they did beat Texas. They beat Texas 9-5, which is a massive win, which leads me to the rankings across the country. So we've
Mm.
got Texas at the top, Florida at the top, Oklahoma at the top, all of these top teams. So far in the season, Kelly, I gotta ask, who is your top team? Who has impressed you the most?
Gosh, it's so difficult because I wanna say Florida, but then Duke just beat Florida, so I wanna say Duke, but Duke has had some losses that I think they
Mhm.
shouldn't have lost, but they did. Um, Man, it's hard. We talk about parity a lot on this show, and I think this year specifically, it's going both ways. I mean, Texas has a great game but then loses, so I can't say really Texas. UCLA just dropped to Duke. I wanna see Duke in the top 4, put them up.
I agree in that there is a lot of parity. I think that the top 10 right now could all be juggled in a bag and it come out completely differently. I think
Mhm.
all there's cases to be made for all of these teams to be in the top 10, top 8, the top 3 especially with Texas, Florida, and of course and Oklahoma. I mean, Oklahoma is one of those that you're like, of course, you're not surprised,
Yeah.
but you're also a little surprised knowing who they lost coming into the season.
Mhm.
But to your point, there's a lot of parity. Could Duke be in the top 4, top 3? Probably. Do those losses, that big loss to Florida, does that hurt?
Yep.
Absolutely. So it'll be interesting to see how these numbers shake out as we move on. And in the vein of numbers and talking about numbers and stats, every week these publications put out rankings and they fight the trolls of
Mhm.
why this team should be this and yada yada. And I don't want to talk about those numbers as much as I want to talk about stats that players use, that teams use. We just talked about Syracuse being number 1 in ERA, and then Stanford being number 1 in batting average, but want to talk through how analytics and stats have changed as athletes. So
Mm.
when you were at Duke, and I know it's different person to person, did you use stats? Did you use analytics? And can you kind of walk me through how you use those things?
Yeah, I mean, I was very blessed to be in this game when a lot of different platforms started showing up. So we had Synergy. Coaches also used 643, but I enjoyed Synergy. You were able to just go on that, and for people who don't know what it is, it's basically a app on your laptop. I'm sure you can get it on your phone. I use it on the laptop that pulls up every single at bat. Well, if your team signs up for it. So let's say Duke had Synergy. Let's say we played Georgia and Georgia had Synergy. I can pull up all of Georgia stats. And what I used it for is to look at O counts when I was facing a pitcher. So I really like to see what they started the at bats with. O2 counts, what did they want to get for a chase pitch? And I like to see their hard hits. What were people hitting hard against these pitches? And that's really what I sat. And I think a lot of the players on Duke used Synergy in that way. We also had that engraved into practice time. So we
Mhm.
would have practice time literally just for film and to going over what the other pitchers are doing, what their hitters do. And then you might see our defense shift a little bit or pinched up the middle just based on the spray chart of hitters. Like if you saw my spray chart, you'd probably pinch and maybe go a little bit right because I hit oppo a lot.
Yeah, and I was at a little bit of a different point. I mean, we were doing those things too, of using, ours was called like Dartfish or whatever.
Oh,
But to your point,
yeah.
that there a ton of public or a ton of different companies that came out with data and information, and you have in your wristband the
Hmm.
shifts, where to go, where to shade to, and it can also change different based on different pitches. And it's such a unique time, but it's also a time where I could totally see a paralysis by analysis thing. And for me as a broadcaster, we don't have access to 643 through ESPN anymore, but
Mm.
I use 643 a ton. Like I love to understand all the things that you just mentioned, OO counts, chase pitches, hard hit balls, things like that. But I loved also to figure out who on the team was seeing the most pitches per at bat, who was the least
Mm,
likely to strike out, all of these different things, and then kind of matching that up with the pitcher and their heat maps of where they like to go early, lefties, all that good stuff. There's so much out there, and it's interesting to see how different programs, different players use it because also there are coaches out there that say, "Oh, well, I don't want to give my players too much. I don't want
yeah.
to overwhelm them." I think that's so fair, but I think if we don't harness this as programs, if you don't harness it, you're going to fall behind
Mhm.
because eventually people are going to catch on to the fact that like there are just certain things that you can rely on with analytics that will help you. And of course, it's not like it's a piece of the story, but it's not everything. But I did want to ask, like, what's been the difference, like, from Duke to now Clemson's coaching staff for you in terms of how you use analytics to inform your players?
Yeah, I feel like Clemson takes a different perspective on it. It was kind of what you were saying, if you like it, here it is for you. But if you
Hmm.
don't like it and you know your game is you play better without it, then you can go do that, you know? And I like the option of choosing. I think if it's to the player's decision of what they like and what they don't like, because information for certain people can be too much and can be
Hmm.
overwhelming, and it can make the game bigger than it is. So there's definitely a fine line of figuring out when film can be helpful and when it's almost detrimental.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more, and I think it's a really hard thing to, like, always, like, kinda be towing the edge or towing the line on, is figuring out
Yeah.
who those players are and how to, like, give them that information digestibly or, and just kind of how to deal with it. So, I think it'll be interesting to see how the game progresses. I would love to talk to an MLB staff or
Mhm.
coach about their players. Like, are all the professionals using it, right? And because I'm sure there are guys that, maybe don't want as much information, but it's so much now integrated into their game. And of course it's an extremely high level. And so you kind of I'd imagine that they kind of have to like pick a pitch, right? Like
Yeah.
kind of what you were saying, like sitting on a pitch, and then when you get two strikes, you just battle. You just try to
Mhm.
fight and stay in between the timing and just fight. So, yeah, no, I'm interested to see how the game progresses and the game moves, and how coaches kind of balance the paralysis by analysis with the fact that there's a ton of really, really good information.
Like you mentioned of you don't wanna be falling behind, the game is modernizing, you know? So if you're not picking up on the film and if you're not kind of not relying on it, but if you're not and letting it come into your program and, like,
Yeah.
accept that this is what softball is now or even baseball, you're gonna fall behind eventually, you know? Like, everyone has access to it now, so why not get on the train or else you're gonna be left behind.
I that is so true. And Lonnie Alameda, this just made me think I was at a camp when I was like 13, 14 at Florida State, and she said, "If you for a moment think you understand this game, it's gonna pass you by."
Mhm.
Like, and for her to say that so, like, confidently, I could not agree more because she is such a wizard with pitch calling, and I think it's so underappreciated, and especially I feel for the coaches that grew up in an era where they had no information, and it was like word of mouth of like, "Oh, she throws rise balls or she throws drop balls." It's like, now you can see the percentage of time they're throwing at OO, what there is exactly what you pointed out to what for chase. And not only can you see the percentages, you can just watch the film. You can like click on that and you can see every single time. So I think coaches, and I think this is just human nature of like, oh, back in my day, we just figured it out without
Yeah.
having to use analytics, or back in my day, we ran and I got so tough. It's like, okay, they're great. Good for you. Let's continue to move forward and keep building and growing this game. And that's what it takes. Um, so yeah, it's cool to hear your
Yeah.
perspective as now a coach and how you kind of deliver that information to your players.
Film also shows more details, like, people were able to
Yes,
pick pitches based on, like, a pitcher's motion, "Oh, she did this
right.
different with the changeup." So, like, example, Jayla, and I
Mhm,
don't feel weird saying it because she's not playing anymore, so I'm not, like,
mhm.
outing her, but
Yeah.
FSU, so I played with Devin Flaherty, on my pro ball team last summer, and she was like, "Yeah, we picked Jayla's changeup just
Mhm.
watching film because her muscles." So on her forearm, she put a knuckle on, and one of her muscles literally popped out when she threw that pitch versus a fastball or something
Mhm.
else. And it's just so crazy how they knew that going into the series and just were able to see it and sit on it before having to figure it out. Usually in the game of softball, it takes a couple, you know, trials to get it right. And they
Right.
had it on the first one. They didn't need to make adjustments. They made an adjustment before we played them. So that was crazy. And then she ended up wearing an arm sleeve. We ended up figuring it out. But it's just crazy how film also can do that.
Love that call out. That's such a good call out too, because it's not just hitting and pitching, it's like body language too. And you
Mhm.
can pick up when the pitcher walks out of the circle. Do they walk out of the circle every single time they get the ball? In which case, there might be one moment in the game where the runner at third could take home, right? Like all those things. That's such a good call out. And I also think that, as especially in broadcasting too, you have to watch the games to really understand a team. You cannot rely solely based on stats. It only tells a part of the story. And when you watch teams, you can like pick up on things, see things, you can see who influences who. All of these are dynamics. So I couldn't agree more. Young players out there, coaches out there, use video. Use video to your advantage, use analytics, stay ahead of the curve, or the game is gonna pass you by.
Yeah.
But yeah, big week ahead for Kelly. The game's already been played at
Boom.
Georgia, but in a couple weeks, Duke versus Clemson, that's gonna be a crazy matchup.
It is.
And Softball Speakeasy fans, coming up in the next couple of weeks, we will have some serious star power as guests. Now, for these episodes that will have guests, they will be one of us with the guests, so we won't be both of us together. But for those episodes, we will try to put out something before to like, ask questions, get your feedback on what you want to hear from our guests. But please give us your feedback on how you think the show is going, what we could do better, what you all want to hear about. But Kelly, do you have anything to add for the Softball Speakeasy fans out there?
Make sure you tune in and listen every Friday.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you all so much for watching, listening, viewing, and subscribing. Episodes come out every single Friday. The goal is to give you unfiltered access to what it's like to be broadcasting and coaching in the ACC and give you a behind-the-scenes look at college softball and the highest level of pro softball with Kelly Torres. I'm Raine Wilson. Thank you so much. We will see you next week on the show.